For many people, their first introduction to the London streets is through the game Monopoly. The iconic names of all the streets, the railway stations and the utilities have become part of the national culture, but it is only when you look closely at the classic Monopoly board do you start to see some very odd things. The game has its origins in the United States, where it's based on a board game called the Landlord's Game, but it first made its way to Britain in 1935 when the rights were purchased by the toy and game maker Waddingtons, who then chose to use London for the British version of the game. So let's get started on the 8 odd things you never noticed about the London Monopoly board. Our first odd destination is the first light blue property, the Angel Islington. For a start, it's not a street, it's a pub, and it wasn't even in Islington. The location of the Angel was actually in Finsbury in 1935, and it was incorporated into the borough of Islington in 1965, 30 years after the board was drawn up, so it should really have been called the Angel Finsbury. There are a few hangovers from the US version that are out of place on the London board. For example, the second odd thing on our list, the Just Visiting Jail corner. The word jail has very odd spelling. In Britain, we would have written jail, G-A-O-L, the correct spelling in 1935. However, the American spelling, jail, was chosen. As Monopoly was a major part of childhood for many baby boomers in Britain, the spelling of jail simply died out, and the American version was adopted. Our third odd destination is found within the oranges. The oranges are meant to represent the law, as they all used to have courthouses or police stations on them. No problem with Bow Street or Vine Street, but in between is Marlborough Street, Monopoly's first invented street. Sadly, there is no such place as Marlborough Street. There is a Great Marlborough Street, which is possibly what Waddingtons had in mind, as that had the Marlborough Street Magistrates Court, but there is no actual Marlborough Street in London. At number 4, we have our next odd square, and that is free parking. Apart from the painful joke that is free parking in central London, we have the car itself. The car in this square is clearly not a British car, but rather is an American 1935 Chevrolet with its body shape and rear-mounted spare wheel. Surely a British car would be more appropriate for a London Monopoly board. Our fifth oddity is the policeman on the Go To Jail corner. This policeman is clearly not a British policeman. That is a New York cop telling you to go to jail. Surely that should be a British policeman with his distinctive helmet for the London board. Now we move on to the posh streets of green, which represent the shopping districts of London, and here we find our 6th odd destination and our next invented street. There is no such road as Bond Street. We have the London Underground station named Bond Street, and we have a new Bond Street and an old Bond Street, but no actual Bond Street. Our 7th oddity is the tax. Why is super tax half the cost of income tax? Surely that should be the other way around. Finally, for our 8th oddity, we move on to the blue section, which represents the wealth of London, over Park Lane and onto the most expensive property on the board, Mayfair. Not exactly an invented street, but certainly one that won't appear in any A to Z. Mayfair is an area of London, like Westminster or Kensington, not a street, and like its namesake in Monopoly, it costs a fortune to buy a house here or to build a hotel. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please have a look at our other videos on the Offbeat London channel, where you may see some very unusual things in and around London.